Good afternoon and welcome to the Tuesday, October 9th meeting of the Pitt County Board of Social Services. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Have we heard from Ms. Perkins-Williams? Okay. So we will observe a moment of silent prayer or silent meditation. Amen. No one has signed up under public comment. So the next order of business, are there any revisions to today's agenda? Then a motion to adopt the agenda as presented is in order.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt today's agenda as presented. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
And inside your packet, you had the minutes from the September meeting. Are there any changes needed to those minutes? Then motion is in order to adopt the minutes from the September board meeting.
So moved.
And I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of adopting the minutes, please let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
And then we have the consent items. We have the Mideast Commission contract renewal. Is there anything you want to say on that, Jan?
No, this is the contract that we do periodically for Home and Community Care Block Grant. The commissioners have already passed on that.
Okay.
So wanted you to be aware.
Thank you.
And then there is a SNAP Process and Technology Improvement Grant for $316,496. Any questions about the grant? Okay, then a motion to adopt the consent items is in order.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adopt the consent items. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, and then under report, Jan, you have the SNAP grant. Do you?
Right, the SNAP grant is the one that you just adopted under the consent items. Brian and I can talk about it. We are extremely excited to win an award for $316,496. So Brian, you want to talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing with that grant?
This is a grant from the United States Department of Agriculture, and it's a process and technology improvement grant. There are three areas or three components of the grant. The grant is for an implementation period of 3 years. The first component is a self-registration component. We would have kiosks in the lobby at the Human Services Center, and clients would be able to come in and identify the reason for their visit, and then they would get a letter designating a service window and a three-digit number identifying themselves. And then when it's time for them to be seen, they would see that number on the monitor, and they would report to the window that's indicated. I don't know if any of you have been in any DMV offices lately, but they use a similar component there. There's a monitor, and you get a ticket when you go in there. When I went in to get mine, I got a ticket, but the individual at the reception desk gave me a ticket. But this system should give a ticket once they put in information as to what their visit is for. And of course, we would have somebody available to help people that would need, assistance learning how to use the self-registration, or if somebody needed assistance, we would be able to assist with that. And there would be a synchronization with the system so that it would sort of give an indicator of what the wait time might be for the client. The other component is rapid document integration. Caseworkers working with food and nutrition services applications and recertifications would have scanners on their desks so that it would be much easier to scan and upload documents. They could do it from their office. Also, those that don't already have electronic signature pads would receive those. And we would also be able to have some portable equipment available that can be used for taking applications or doing recertifications away from the office as that need arises. And we could also scan equipment, scan documents with that equipment. Also, we would include 2 kiosks in the Human Services Center lobby so that clients could bring their review paperwork, any type of documentation needed for their case. They could bring that in and scan it in themselves and receive a receipt for the information that's left. So that would be another self-service opportunity so that they wouldn't necessarily have to wait in line, have somebody at the desk make copies, and then give them a receipt. We can provide a receipt now, but it has to be done at the window, and we have to actually photocopy the hard copies. But this way they could scan their documents and take their original documents back with them. The third component is text messaging and email to remind clients of upcoming reviews, to prevent clients from having to have cases if they don't, get their review paperwork in on time and a certain amount of time has elapsed, they have to go back through the full application process. But we'd rather clients be aware and get their reviews in so they don't have to go back through that process. And this would be a text message or an email as a reminder that it's time for the recert to be returned. And between October of last year and May of this year, we surveyed over 11,000 clients who indicated they would be in favor of receiving text messages or emails in order to get reminders about their recerts. This is not part of the grant, but there's one other thing that came out of our SNAP collaborative that the state is doing also to help people remember to get their recert paperwork in. For years, the recert paperwork that was mailed out on white paper, and it can easily get lost in the shuffle with a lot of other mail that people receive. Well, the state has started mailing the recert forms out on a light pink paper, and it does stand out, and it is easier to see. And we have noticed, we feel like we don't have any figures right now on it, but just by visual inspection of the number of recerts that are coming in, we can tell that that is helping recerts get brought back into the agency. So that was something else good that came out of the SNAP collaborative, of how we could improve the process. So the outcomes of the grant, we hope to have wait times to decrease. And by those clients who are able to use the self-service options in the lobby, we hope that processing times will shorten because we have the paperwork in on time and the documentation is scanned in and can be accessed right at the caseworker's desk. We want to reduce the number of reapplications by the work coming in so that clients do not have to go back through the reapplication process. And by using the kiosks, when clients put in their own information, it does increase privacy and confidentiality. So those are the projected outcomes of the grant, and I'll be happy to try to answer any other questions you might have about the improvements that we've got planned.
And for Ms. Nelson's benefit, we were part of what is called a SNAP collaborative, which was a USDA project for 3 years, about 3 years it turned out, with 3 other states and 9 counties. And so we started looking at how we were doing work, and this is part of what came out of this, some of these ideas. And we are talking about off-site kinds of activities. You could go to nutrition sites, for example, and work with clients there who might not want to come into the office because typically our seniors don't get much in the way of a food stamp benefit. But if we took the application to them, maybe they would then apply and even if it is only $16, get some type of a food stamp benefit. So that was some of what we were thinking about as it relates to off-site kinds of things. So
So how many kiosks will there be?
Well, the grant was to have 4 of the registration kiosks and 2 of the scanning kiosks.
So have you had a chance to test them out? Have you seen them?
We have seen them, not recently, but previously we've seen similar demonstrations about how the registration kiosk works and how the receipt is provided.
So as soon as the commissioners approve the spending of the money, then we will start working on getting things in.
Is there a target date to have it in and live and?
About the first of the year, right?
That's
first of
right.
January?
Yes.
Okay.
Good deal, thank you.
Efficiency
you.
improvement for sure. Strategic plan update.
Okay, I think everyone received a copy of the strategic plan update, and I'm just going to hit a few of the really critical high spots in there for you, a couple from each of the goals. And as you noted in our notes, the updates are in bold type, so that would help you see. So for Goal 1, improve safety and support for children. Certainly in our child support area, we're exceeding 23 of 27 benchmarks as of June. We have started the visitation coaching. We have a practice guide that's now been developed for all of our staff to use for child and family visitation. Permanency roundtables have begun. Gwen has been leading that effort to work with our children who have been in foster care, at least the initial group who've been in foster care for a long time, to try and look at the barriers. We've now expanded that to a larger group, and so we're doing that with the goal of getting them back into some type of permanency. The child and family team meetings have increased. We're getting more participation from our guardian ad litems and other child care advocates, and you saw that our chart is going in the upward direction. We did get our Foster Parent Association formed. They're meeting monthly. We have an average of attendance of about 36 foster parents. They've even set up their own Facebook page, so they are moving right along. We have 17 staff now certified in Triple P. And so 4 of those can lead Triple P groups. We've worked with Teddy Bear and their Child Welfare Division, or our Child Welfare Division has gotten an index set of 2,000 short printable English and Spanish publications that can be useful with families. So we're doing a lot of work, I think, around meeting the strategies that we had set forward for child welfare and improving safety and support for our families and our children, which was Goal 1. For Goal 2, improving safety and support for vulnerable adults. Again, we've done a variety of things, but the 2 things I'm going to point out are we got an increase in the number of special assistance in-home slots, so we can work with more families there in order to help keep folks in their home and not have to be placed in an institution. We had a real community event in June. It was called the Floral Float, and it was something that our adult services staff worked on and came up with. But the goal of this was to raise the awareness in the community of elder abuse and how to report and who to report to, and that it is something that people need to pay attention to. So we do believe that worked on improving our communication. If you look at the Goal 3, improving opportunities for family self-sufficiency, our employment and training staff have been very busy. In 17-18, we averaged 43 people per month just in the food stamp section alone, and 25 folks have obtained employment. The community college has hired a success navigator to work with our folks that are going to community college in the E&T program, and so they are trying to keep those folks in school and on track. There have been a lot of job fairs that our folks have worked on and been part of, and they recently partnered with the Pitt County Committee for Employment of People with Disabilities to help them with some job fairs that they were having. Our staff are now spending days at the NC Career Center with Workforce Solutions. They're at the DSS Human Services. They also spend some time at Life NC. So we're working really hard from that standpoint. Goal 4, increase the extent to which the agency promotes communication and coordination. So we have been working here. We have increased our cooperation. The Public Information Office is working really hard with us, and y'all have seen some of that from some of the videos that they've done to help us. They also have helped us with some press releases. They did a lot with the Crisis Intervention Program and got that information out. Brian's staff have a work group formed to start working on a resource guide, a healthcare resource guide. We had the employee fair this year, so that's about communications across the agency and other departments. We invited other agencies to come into that fair besides just our staff, some of the folks that we should be interacting with, to talk about what they do. And I will share with you that outside of this, we've also, some of the other departments helped us with DSNAP this year, so the Disaster Food Stamp Program. So we definitely are communicating with each other. As far as we've set up a new log for assessment of CPS abuse, and so that has helped a lot. Staffing, we're hiring. Staffing has been restructured in CPS. We've got the extra supervisor in there. The foster care supervisor has just been hired, so we'll be able to get that distribution so that we're meeting the standards of supervisor to worker ratio a whole lot closer. With the help of our MIS division of the county, our fiscal folks and the county work together to develop and implement a software program that monitors expenditures and payments, and that's something Angela can talk about, but you can do your requisition and it tracks all the way through. We have obviously we're working with other agencies. We've got the SNAP Collaborative that we talked about and the grant. We also have a pending grant application in cooperation with the Greenville Housing Authority, and we will know on that by November 30th whether we got that. It's a $257,000 grant to help with family reunification and for folks, foster children aging out of the system. Talked about the human service videos. We put the banners about adoption on the Pitt area transit vans, the graduation event. We have been doing trauma screening for our children served in child welfare. We are using the modified manual that the state has put out. Our management information services also help develop a employment and training software to track participants, so we've been doing things from that standpoint. So those are the things for Goal 4. Goal 5, staff development. We will point out that 3 of our 4 recent administrative, management, and supervisory vacancies were filled in-house, and the new foster care supervisor was a promotion in-house. So we're trying to do that. Mentoring goals are being developed in our Partners for Effective Performance plans. We have sent out a list of leadership development materials that we have available for checkout. Obviously, the Social Services Institute did not happen, so that's not going on. But we did have staff go to the Child Support Conference, the legal conferences, the Child Support Managers course. One staff has completed that, so we're trying to encourage folks to get training. We have 1 MSW student in adult services from Economic Services, and she has now been hired in adult services, and we have a 2nd MSW student that's supposed to be starting, that's in our economic support services area, that will be moving into adult services for her internship. So we're trying to help folks internally grow with their degrees, so that is going on. There has been in economic services some new curriculum developed to help with training those staff. We had 84% of our folks complete their required 24 hours of training. Let's see, job shadowing is going on in economic services for sure. And in fact, all of our interpreters are spending time with our child welfare folks to understand better so that they can interpret for that particular area in a better manner. All of our adult services staff have been cross-trained in adult protective services so that they can fill in. Our personnel and paralegal, we've had some cross-training going on in both of those areas. Staff members have attended a national adoption conference. We had a staff member at the National Child Fatality Task Force Conference and American Public Human Services Association's national conference. So we are trying to get information from other places and be out to see what's going on in the world. Let's see, I'm going to skip a lot of this and move on to the agency organization. We have utilized temporary staff where necessary. We are using our floaters, so that is going on. CPS has been restructured to help with reducing the need for backup for on-call. The adult services folks have done some real work around guardianship teams so that we have high demand cases and low demand cases. So there's a team to support the low demand cases, and they have a higher caseload as a result, and then a group to support those that are more high demand, and they have a much smaller caseload, but they're sharing so that they can back each other up and know what's going on. So that was a really neat idea that they've worked on. It seems to be going really well, and Cynthia's shaking her head yes. Research has begun with other agencies around career ladders, and based on the information our chair gave us, all the staff have been advised about student loan repayments and where to go to access that information to see if they qualify. We are using the EAP program, the Employee Assistance Program, more than we probably ever have in the past to help folks process and work through issues. Staff are participating in a lot of the wellness programs. I know we have folks in the diabetes management program and the weight loss program, and we had folks that attended the parenting class programs that the county offered. So we are certainly trying to encourage that kind of thing. And I think we've raced through that, but those are some of the real highlights, I think, in the strategic plan. If there's anything that I did not touch on, obviously this is the first 6 months, and we hope to work on this a lot more and move it further, and probably are going to have to amend and revise some things. So I'll entertain any questions anybody has.
I think I'm excited about the training that the workers are able to attend. And is there some mechanism for sharing that information once they get back, like a lunch and learn, or is it talked about in staff meetings?
Yeah. Most of these are going on in their regular unit and staff meetings that they have. So it is getting shared with those that need that information.
Good. Sounds like you've been very busy.
Yes.
We're going to move to your disaster report.
Okay. As most of you know, we had a hurricane. And we were pretty busy with that hurricane, and I'm not sure who's clicking for me. Susan's got it. Okay. So we were advised that we needed to open shelters effective September 12th, and if y'all remember, we had a very abbreviated board meeting last month because we were working in that direction. Our staff arrived at 3 p.m. to start setting up the cots and getting the shelters organized. There was anticipated at least a Red Cross person to be at each of the shelters. That did not happen at most shelters. The shifts were scheduled to work from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. During the height of the storm, we didn't want folks going out for shift change, so that particular shift was double scheduled so that we had one group that was at least there for 24 hours. The Walter B. Jones folks, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but also they served for the most part 24-hour shifts. We had 5 middle schools for the general population, and then Walter B. Jones served as our medical needs shelter. And Cynthia can talk about that all day long if you want to hear more about that. We had a lot of folks come into that shelter. The state opened a regional shelter, but just the logistics of trying to make that work seemed pretty complicated, and there were going to always be folks that were going to be getting or finding out that they had the need, and then we'd have to try and it'd be too late to try and get them over to the regional shelter. So after much discussion, we decided to open our own shelter for special needs. We had 185 staff scheduled to work in the shelters. We were able to close the shelters at 3 o'clock or thereabouts on Sunday, so Not all of those staff wound up working, but we had 185 that were working in the shelters. We had 8 staff that worked with the Red Cross to help folks transition home once those shelters consolidated into 2 Red Cross shelters. The Red Cross did start operating those shelters Sunday night. They were in churches. So 7 staff from our management team rotated the duty in the Emergency Operations Center. And we were there longer than we managed shelters because we had to be there to help problem solve as things came up. When our staff were in the Emergency Operations Center, we were handling shelter questions, any issues that came up, got shelter counts for feeding purposes, made reports to the state about what was open, handled food stamp questions, because as soon as the storm hits, people start getting concerned about their food stamps and what services are going to be out there for them. So some of that discussion after the storm started. On September 24th at 8:15 p.m., that is standing in my mind, we were notified that we were approved to start the DSNAP program, which was the Disaster Food Stamp Program, and we were going to start that on September the 28th, so we basically had 4 days to prepare for it. Did not believe that Pitt County would be asked to do that, but we were. So we were working 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. for 8 days. If you all have remembered in the past, we only ran the program for 5 days. This year that was changed. We had 3 sites established, and we scheduled the equivalent of 528 FTEs for those 8 days at the application sites. Plus we contracted with the Sheriff's Department to have a deputy per site. The staff who weren't out at the shelter, we keep calling them shelters, that weren't out at the sites stayed at the office and keyed until 7 o'clock each night. Plus we worked 2 Saturdays. And we kept our regular work going. So staff are worn out. We wound up using probably not all of the one schedule, but we did use the majority. We took 6,683 applications in that 8-day period for disaster food stamps. We had 1,400 replacement requests made, and you can see on the screen the approval and denials of those. The approvals for the DSNAP, obviously, we had a significant percentage approved. We have not yet gotten the final report from the state, but this is our own internal report on that. What? Too fast? The supplements, let me tell you what is the difference between a replacement and a supplement. And we've taken about 1,300 supplements also. A replacement is someone who had a food loss. And so we are replacing the food, and that is what they declared when they completed their request. The supplements are for people who had some other loss as it relates to the hurricane. So perhaps they lost income because these folks already get food stamps. The replacement and supplement folks already get food stamps. So if they had an income loss, their business was shut down, and we had a lot, Walmart was shut down 2 days. A lot of the restaurants were closed. So if we had somebody who had lost wages, then that might allow them to receive a supplement, but they might not be eligible for replacement because they had no food loss. So that's why you're seeing some difference there. You can still do replacement and supplement requests up through October 15th. So these numbers are going to continue to grow. We still have a significant number of supplements to key. We are just about through keying all of our applications for DSNAP. Those were probably done by noon today. But that's kind of what the staff have been doing, and so now we can change. We have, through what has been keyed and processed, and this was as of October 7, $2,138,492 in additional benefits have been issued for Pitt County residents. Those benefits have gone to 13,774 individuals. The average payment for someone getting a DSNAP approval notice is $390.93. The average supplement for the household is $180.12. And again, as you see, that's as of October 7. So that may change some as we go through and get the rest of this done. So I certainly want to recognize our staff for the hard work. These folks have really worked. I mean, they've just put out a tremendous amount of work. We also want to thank our three churches. Peace Presbyterian, Salem United Methodist Church, and Philippi Church were all gracious enough to let us use their space. And I will tell you that Peace and Philippi both got the awards for the number of applicants that came in. That's where a large number of the folks were served. And the other thing I want to point out is all the county departments who helped out. Human Resources, Manager's Office, Soil and Water Engineering, Permits, Inspections, and Sheriff all had staff who helped at some point during this process by taking applications, working the reception desk, whatever. So it was certainly a county-wide process, but the bulk of the folks were DSS staff. So that is what has been going on as far as it relates to Hurricane Florence.
So my question revolves around your sites. One of the other areas of the county that had significant power outage was the southern end of Pitt County. Have we addressed the needs of the folks down in the Grifton area? Because none of those sites are really convenient to the folks in Grifton who may have transportation issues.
We reached out to the town of Grifton for ideas about where to locate a site, and we were not given any ideas. So Peace was as close as we could get, and it also addressed some of the folks in the Ayden area who lost power for a while. But there was a problem in locating an ADA compliant, large enough space, had bathroom space, et cetera, in Grifton. And so that was what happened there.
I didn't want you all to have any pushback because I know Grimesland was out and you sort of had Salem, which
Salem was aimed for Grimesland, right.
But we hear a lot of times in the southern part of the county, much like you hear in the northern part of the county, that
And I have talked,
down here.
We have talked with at least one lady and one of the council members in the Grifton area and explained kind of what transpired, and they are looking for something for future sites or future events, because we know flooding will always be an issue down there. Other questions?
Medicaid transportation.
Medicaid transformation, yeah, that's fun.
Glasses on my eyes instead of on top of my head.
Right. This was coming from last month's meeting, and this will be a regular report as things change. So, in part, because Ms. Nelson was not part of our earlier discussions at our planning retreat this past year and stuff, we're going to kind of go back a little bit and play some catch-up. And this is a really high-level overview, but we can get down in the weeds if anybody wants to do that. So, again, Medicaid managed care is supposed to be based on the best practices from other states and building on the existing infrastructure in North Carolina. The vision is high-value care, improve population health, support providers, and build a sustainable program with predictable costs. And the key themes, as we've talked about before, are to improve the health and well-being of North Carolinians, focus on health of the whole person, support our clinicians in delivering high-quality care at a good value, and address both medical and non-medical drivers of health. So that is sort of the premise about what they're doing. So as we pointed out not too long ago, we no longer have a division of medical assistance. It is now the Health Benefits Division, and Medicaid is certainly their focus. So we're moving from fee-for-service to managed care. And that's kind of where we are at this point. That's what the plan is. When we talked back in January, We were saying we were going to go live within 18 months of the CMS, which is the federal approval. That they thought at that point was going to be in July. That did not happen. And so now they're estimating November of 2019. And part of why that didn't happen is there were some changes to the plan, so the plan got modified somewhat, which slowed the Medicaid folks, the federal Medicaid folks down. So now, and I've kind of highlighted the change here, they're estimating November 2019, 2 regions will go live, and in February 2020, the remaining 4 regions will go live for the standard plan. And we'll talk about what's the standard plan in a little bit, and I've got a map of the regions for you. Additionally, when we initially started this conversation, there were going to be 3 statewide MCOs, or managed care organizations, which would be commercial plans. And then there would be up to 12 provider-led entities in the 6 regions. So you'd have statewide plans and provider-led plans in each region. In the recent conversation, it has been determined that Region 1 and Region 6, and we are Region 6, will be limited to 1 provider-led entity. And the reasoning for that, as best I can understand, is it has to do with we're so rural. This is the tip of the mountains down in the little point going to Tennessee, and then this is the northeastern North Carolina piece. And so it's very rural, and could it financially support multiple organizations, I think was the big discussion. And then there's going to be a specialized statewide health plan for foster children. One of the things that we talked about initially was that we were going to try and make sure in the proposal that there was eligibility maintained for parents of children who went into foster care. That seems to maybe have gotten out of the plan, so it's still a discussion point, so that's why the question mark. One of the essential providers certainly is going to be our local health department. They are going to have to be part of this, just like the local mental health and those kinds of folks. There is an exempt population, and that's the members of the federally recognized tribes. So the Cherokee will not be part of this, or any other federally recognized tribe, but typically the Cherokee Indian. The prepaid health plans must include all the willing providers in their networks. So folks aren't to be excluded, and you know, there might be the occasional exception, but that's pretty much the plan. So again, the statewide strategy is to have quality, and it's the statewide quality measures to assess performance and drive progress. Again, we're not talking fee for service. They're going to be measuring quality and looking at specific outcomes. So care management is going to be big in this, just like we have now with Access East. Going to build on what's working well. There are going to be advanced medical homes for those with specific critical needs. There are going to be a variety of roles in care management, and they're going to have a lot of data analytics to monitor what is going on, how well folks are being served, are they getting the outcomes that they're looking for. Value-based payments, again, back to the metrics and the appropriateness of care, and incentivized prepaid health plans to use a variety of payment models. And then the social needs, health-related social needs, and reducing health inequities. These are some of the things that they're talking about and promoting in the plans. So what are some of the services and populations that are being carved out? Dental services are not going to be part of this. And what's interesting is initially they said the local education agencies would not be impacted. Well, now they are indicating that existing services will continue, and there's legislative support for development of new services that could be funded through the educational systems in the school systems in the state. Services provided by the CDSAs, the Child Development Service Agencies. So for us, that is the folks in the Irons building working with kids 0 to 3. who have some diagnosed or potentially diagnosed disability. Eyeglasses will not be part of this. Populations with short-term eligibility, so emergency-only coverage, folks. Enrollees that have retroactive eligibility, but not ongoing eligibility, or our presumptive eligibility, which is what we do primarily with our pregnant women until they get through the whole process. The health insurance premium payment beneficiaries, those are our folks, Brian, and you're going to help me here. These are the folks that are the Qs, right? The folks that we help, they're Medicare folks, and we help make their Medicaid premium payments for them. So we call them the Qs. And there's 6 different types of Qs, I think. Qualified beneficiaries is a whole number of them. Then there's the PACE program, which we don't operate here in Pitt County. Family planning would not be part of the Medicaid managed care, nor are the prison inmate services. Would not be part of this.
So what's it mean when it's carved out? What's that mean, Jan?
Carved out. That means that they're not going to be part of the Medicaid managed care program. They can continue to use Medicaid like they do today. It's a fee for service. So they've carved out that population from.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay. So how's it going to impact eligibility and enrollment? So again, it's supposed to be simple, timely, user-friendly, online, mail, telephone, in person. We still are going to have a primary role in all of this, determining eligibility, doing reviews, helping you get in and out of managed care, and eligibility appeals will continue as they are today. There is talk, and if you look at future state, there is talk that there would be an eligibility and enrollment electronic system where the client could go in, key, and pretty much get almost real-time eligibility determination. I have some concerns that will ever happen based on the current NC FAST that we have and whether, we struggle now. So I'm not sure that that'll happen, but that is the goal. So they hope to do upgrades and web-enabled. So the enrollment process on the right-hand side is that the client, the beneficiary, will choose their health plan, their primary care provider. The enrollment broker, there is an enrollment broker who's going to work with the clients around this, and that was Maximus. We talked about that, I think, month before last, that they had been selected. The enrollment broker is going to provide support and education. They will counsel the beneficiaries. I liken this to SHIP for the Medicare folk. This is kind of what the enrollment broker is supposed to help do. There is a plan selection period. I believe that's 90 days. And you get services during that transition. And then if you don't select, you'll be auto-assigned. So and that assignment is going to try and look at who your current provider is and try to connect you to a plan that is working with that current provider. So looking at the pathway, you apply for coverage, you have the opportunity to select a plan. We determine eligibility, and then the individual is enrolled if they select their primary health plan, and if they don't, there'll be auto-assignment. So that just kind of runs you through that process. So there's going to be a beneficiary support system, and so your prepaid health plan, it does what you would think it would do, talks about member services, operation, all that. The key thing that we want to stress is that the primary health plan, prepaid health plan provider is going to arrange the non-emergency medical transportation. And that's a real change. We do that now for folks. So the providers will be contracting with transportation providers to get that service done. And then they will be calling and they will be paying, they will be negotiating the contracts. So that's a real change. The enrollment broker we've kind of talked about, and then there's going to be an ombudsman role, and that actually will be let out for bid in the not too far distant future. But that's your advocate. That's the person who's going to make sure that we're doing what all of us need to be doing, and they're going to be looking at the trends in performance and that kind of thing. Now, we talked about this is more than just medical, so social determinants of health is going to be critical in all of this. And so there's going to be some standardized screening for those unmet social needs, and we're talking things like food and housing, those kinds of things that can significantly impact someone's ability to deal with their health needs too. So there's going to be a resource database, going to look at potentially some public-private regional pilot operations to do some of this, and I have heard some indication that the 211 system is probably going to play a part in all of this. Not seen that in writing, but have heard that. So let's look at estimated enrollment. In year one, 73% of our Medicaid beneficiaries will be enrolled in the standard plan. And then in year three, we're going to have a year here to kind of get all this worked out. And then in year three, tailored plans, which is going to get the LMEs in with the severe mental health issues, the DD, those kinds of folks, would be in year three. They would come in as would foster children, so that's a very small number. And then in year five, it's your dual eligibles, the Medicaid, Medicare folks, the folks that get the community alternative programs, children's, disabled adults, again, a very small number, but they would come in year five. So that's kind of the flow of this. So starting in November of 2019, the first two regions will roll out, and this is the standard plan, and that's where the beginning of that 73% would start. So here are your regions, and you see we are Region 6 in the sort of the royal blue. And so looking at us, we would have 4 statewide providers potentially in our, well, we will have 4 statewide providers in our region, which are the paid health plans, like the Aetnas and those kinds of folks. I don't know that they're one, but that kind of group. And then we'll have 1 provider-led entity. So you could have the potential for 5 standard plans in a region for a person to choose from. Additionally, the state is recommending that if you're a provider-led entity, to be financially viable, you need to serve more than 1 region. So they are recommending at least 2 regions be served by a provider-led entity. And so I know that we do have 1 provider-led entity that has been talking to folks here in Region 6, and they are talking about serving 3 regions that are contiguous. So that would be 6, 4, and 5. Now, whether they will bid or not, I do not know. But that is, there's 1 group that's having some conversation. Those bid packages have gone out, and they are, in fact, putting forward their proposals by the end of this week. And in a couple of months, and that's further down the road, but in a couple of months we will actually know who they are. So if you look at your standard plans and your tailored plans, again, November 2019, the first 2 regions go live, and then we phase in. And their focus is going to be physical health, mild to moderate behavioral health. That's the group that's going in first. Then the tailored plans will start in July of 2021. And there'll be 5 to 7 of those. They're currently being designed. And the LME MCOs will have a contract for the first 4 years after go live, because there's some need to transition them. And they're going to focus on physical health, the tailored plans, physical health, and complex behavioral health needs. And I wrote down what all those acronyms are if anybody wants to know what any of them are. So severe mental illness, severe and persistent mental illness, serious emotional disorder, substance abuse, traumatic brain injury, and intellectual and developmental disability. So, as I said, the RFP was released August the 9th, October 12th, which is this Friday. The proposals are due back. February, they will sign the contracts or award the contracts. And then again, enrollment starts in July for that first group, with the actual kickoff of the process being a couple of, November, several months later. So it gives you some time to get enrolled. So that's sort of where we are right now. Lots of questions. I'm not sure I can answer questions, but there are lots of questions all of us have right now on kind of what's going to happen, how it's going to happen. It's going to be an interesting time.
Do the regions come on in numeric order?
We don't know how the regions are going to come on. They will be
6 and 2 as the first
potentially they could go, you know, let's do a high volume region and a smaller region, you know, or they may do contiguous regions, or they may, I mean, we haven't heard how that plan is yet. Now, this is a standing agenda item for the Directors Association, and so as things change, I mean, we'll have it as a standard item here. It may not be every month we talk about it, but as things change, I will bring you more information. There are handouts. I think I've shared these handouts with y'all before about do you or someone in your family get Medicaid or health choice? Here's what's happening. So there's a lot going on to try and help folks become aware of what's going on. But until it hits you, I mean, I'm not sure how much folks are paying attention. I probably wouldn't be.
And do we know which states are being used as the model for this?
It's Michigan, Minnesota, one of those states, because we brought in the gentleman who crafted it there to come do it here. But it's one of those states. It's an M state up in the Midwest.
Okay.
It's the best I can tell you right now.
So the plan to, you know, one of the big pieces will be a plan for you to phase out of transportation and somebody else phase into that.
Right.
So,
Well, and you know, the health department's got lots of big discussions here too to figure out, as does mental health. But yeah, transportation's going to be a big issue for both for us to figure out what our role is going to continue. Are we still going to determine the eligibility for transportation? Because if that's the case, then we'll have some need for staff to do that. Obviously, the scheduling will go to the provider. So then we'll need to figure out exactly how we use our staff differently as a result. From the county's perspective, obviously, they have a transportation system that is a big provider of services for our staff, our clients. And so where do they fit into this? That's just one of the groups. And a lot of the mom and pop operations, it will be a transition for everybody. Okay.
Memorandum of Understanding.
Yes. I'm not taking everybody back on that one. I'm not going to take everybody all the way back on that one. Everybody does know, and I think everybody does have a copy of the Memorandum of Understanding. I think I have shared it with everybody at various points, a copy of the law itself, so you have seen that. There is a work group at the School of Government that was appointed by the legislature to work on our plans. And so one of the pieces of this, and there are basically 4 parts. There's a regionalization part, there's a memorandum of understanding, there is a study piece, and then there are a variety of child welfare changes. So this law has a lot of moving parts to it, and that is SL 2017-41. And anybody can go to the School of Government's website and look at the Social Services Work Group and read everything that's been transpired on this. But about 6 months ago, the state did the bid for and award the bid for a study of North Carolina's social services system and our child welfare system. And so this is the report from that working group. And be thankful, because this is actually the report from that working group. You're welcome to read. So I'm giving you very much the shorthand version. We started out certainly with, where are we up here?
Need to go back?
Yes, please. Yeah. We started out with looking at what the social services work group was focused on. And as you can see, there are a variety of parts and pieces to this. So, and again, I am not going to go through every one of these. We'll skim through them. The Centers for Families, which is who, for supportive families, is who did this actual study. So we're focused on the need for reform, and what they said, which is really interesting, is North Carolina is probably the only state, or one of very few states, that has decided to do this outside of a court order. We ourselves recognize the need for reform and have begun the process. Many states have a judge tell them they got to do it with specific parameters, so they were most impressed. There were 3 phases to the work. And so we started out looking at phase 1, which is this actual, you can move, yeah. Phase 1 is to really, they were going to do an initial study, make some recommendations. They have now completed that, and that is the report that I have here. Phase 2 is now they're going to get detailed recommendations, develop implementation plans, do all those pieces, and then phase 3 will be continued technical assistance and monitoring. So the first report has gone to the legislature. Phase 2 will be the second report, and that'll probably be about 6 months from now before that report goes forward. So they're looking at providing sort of a roadmap. They did a lot of work in trying to touch as many people as they could to understand North Carolina's system, because as many of you know, we are one of the few states that social services are delivered in the counties with state supervision. And well, most of the states, it is a state organization that would be delivering these services. So that was important for them to talk about. They looked at all the different, they did lots of studies on best practice. They went to lots of agencies. They had focus groups, surveys. I mean, this was a major effort that they undertook. And one of the big findings is, you know, all 100 counties work very differently. And we all have different ways of delivering the services. Some of us are doing different best practices. So the recommendations are trying to deal with all of those differences. And so they may focus on what one county's doing, but other counties may not be doing that. So I'm not going to talk about the methodology because you all can see that in your handout. Some of you probably participated in some of this survey. Their first findings and recommendations, I'm going to hit a few of these, and I think a big one is governance. That is you guys. And so there are recommendations to enhance statutes to ensure that there is consistency of mission and authority of the county boards governing social services. Establish minimum qualifications for board members and clearly delineate duties and responsibilities. And the second recommendation is provide training resources for county board members to include training for new members as well as annual training updates. And I think those are both very important comments that they were making. The leadership has to do a lot with the General Assembly and what they need to be doing as it relates to helping with social services and making sure that we are where we need to be. So one of the things is looking at those performance goals that are in the MOU and making sure that we've got it right. And, you know, how can we move it towards outcomes as opposed to processes? So that is a critical recommendation. Moving on to the next one, I'm not going to spend any time on that one. Going to the next one, regional offices. You know, this started out, we thought they were going to regionalize social services in each local county, and that was, in fact, what the initial thrust of this legislation was. We were able to get the legislation changed during the adoption to include state regional offices to support county departments of social services and not necessarily have county departments of social services regionalize similar to what mental health did or what health does in some cases. So that is still out there as a possibility, but a big piece of what the work group has done and what this study is is to have those regional offices in place to support social services departments. They have gone so far as to say that they suggest 7 of them, and they have even suggested that one of those 7 needs to be the 3 very large counties in a region of their own. Because, you know, Swain County has very little in common with Mecklenburg County. And so to think about the needs differently depending on the size of the county. They've had, the next thing on regional offices is they've talked about exactly who needs to be in the regional offices, the types of jobs, what their roles need to be. So I thought that was interesting. So then when you go to recommendation number 11, they are pointing out staffing recommendations. First and foremost, DHHS has done a staffing study and a qualification study for state staff. So perhaps that may impact us because we sort of follow under OSHR. But more importantly, they're talking in recommendation 12 about making sure they're competitive salaries for the state staff. And then when you move on to the next recommendation, it talks about statewide minimum salaries for county staff. And devise a process for the state to augment county social services staff salaries. Because again, counties are funded at all different levels based on their tax base. And why should some counties be training sites for other counties just because, you know, we pay more and so we can attract them? And so that churn that goes on of staff movement, this would be something to hopefully help do that and also to help people have highly qualified staff. So and provide matching funds to counties who can't meet state caseload standards so they can create and staff positions. So that is a good recommendation and something I think a lot of counties really support. So then we move into training, and that there needs to be, you know, specific training opportunities for everybody. So those are some of the many recommendations, and certainly there is an executive summary in these 2 documents that actually outlines each of the individual recommendations if you want to go read the 25-page executive summary as opposed to the 70 or 100-page full study. But it really is interesting considering what time they had and the amount of work they did, some of the recommendations that they've made. Then they did a child welfare study. And again, very similarly, they did staff surveys, they did meetings, they did, you know, looked at reporting that the state has. They, you know, and just like they did with the other, they looked at best practices around the nation. So a lot of things went on there. I'm going to highlight the recommendations. Don't skip all that. To recommendation number 2, they are recommending convening a very broad group of stakeholders to more fully develop the vision for improving outcomes, looking at the theory of change, and that kind of thing. So I think that's a really strong recommendation that the state is working hard now to even begin to talk about. Another recommendation has to do with state organization. The like number 12, which talks about strengthening the partnership between the state division, the division of medical assistance, and the divisions of mental health to make sure those behavioral services are available for parents of children in foster care. Because right now, your child goes into foster care, your Medicaid goes away. You can't afford to get those support services that you need. And recommendation 11, talking about working with all the partners to remove barriers and having buy-in. The statewide framework, we've been asking for a practice model for a long time. And there is finally here a recommendation for a practice model. And so the state is going to be taking a look at whether that is the appropriate practice model and how to get us involved with that. So let's see, training, I'm going to skip to training, which is recommendation 39. Pre-service training needs to be redesigned. because again, the majority of the staff who are coming in don't have a social work degree. And so how can we get those? And I know the schools of social work are working really hard to try and figure out with the directors in the state ways that we can augment that training for folks who don't come in with a social work degree. But so we really do need to work with the state on that, and so that is part of what's going on now. And it needs to be a strategy for professional development. It's got to be an ongoing process and not just standalone modules. So I'm just hitting some of the high spots. I thought it was helpful to have some of those recommendations in front of you. Again, I would encourage you to go take a look at the plans itself and their report, because it can be very useful. Now, let's talk about the other part of the MOU, which is kind of, the state gave us 27 standards to meet, and they're supposed to be giving us the data as to how we're meeting those standards. And thus far, we really haven't gotten a report. We're having to scrounge various places to try and find out how we're doing, and in some areas, we do not have any information. So we put together kind of a slideshow, but you also have in your packet just a one-pager that does this, but the slideshow I thought would help with the community too. So if you look, and we've compared North Carolina, Pitt County, and we looked at the whole fiscal year, and then the first month would be July to show you where Pitt County is. So as you can see, 95% of our screened-in CPS reports will be investigated within the required timeframes. We're not meeting that one. Too fast.
You're closer to meeting it than the state was as a whole.
Right. Well, no. We are at 88%. We did meet it. We were much closer to meeting it for last fiscal year. Yeah, but for the month of July, we are at 88%, and we need to be at 95%. So again, it's an issue of staffing primarily. So, but yes, we're not that far out of line with where the state is as a whole. So if you move then to the next one. We are no more than 9% of our children who are maltreated in a 12-month period will have a subsequent finding of maltreatment. Pitt County is meeting that standard. We're meeting that standard in July. We have come a long way from the prior fiscal year. I hope we continue with this trend. So that's a plus. We do good work with our folks. It's just the timing. 95% of our foster youth will have a face-to-face visit with the social worker. We're right with the state. We dropped from where we were meeting that standard. We had several workers who did not document, and that was part of the issue as to why we did not meet. Those workers have different plans now. At least 41% of our children enter foster care will be discharged to permanency within 12 months. We are right on track with the state. We have been slowly moving up, but it's a struggle everywhere. If you move to 8.3% of children discharged within 12 months to reunification, no more than 8.3% will re-enter foster care within 12 months. And you can see that Pitt crept up a little bit after the 1 year, but is still below where the state is and definitely meeting this standard. No more than 4.1 placement moves within the first 1,000 days of foster care. Well, one, you don't want kids in foster care for 1,000 days. But as you can see, Pitt is not that far out of the state standard, and we have significantly reduced it from where it was. We were at 13.6 placement moves. We're now down to 7 placement moves. And that is attributable in a lot to some of the children and the problems that they bring into care, because many of these children have mental health issues, which makes it difficult. If you look at paternities established for children of unwed mothers, in In the fiscal year, last fiscal year, we did that for 102%, so we exceeded the state. This is sort of a cumulative kind of process, and so to take 1 month out of context is not representative of where we will be by the end of the year. And I'm not sure exactly how the state is going to handle that on a month-to-month basis myself. 89.2% of child support cases will be under court order, and you see we're at 89.04. So we are doing well. 66.6% of current child support payments will be collected, and we are at 67.1% for the month of July, so we are meeting that standard in July. 68% of cases will have a payment toward arrears. Again, that's one of those things that's got to kind of accumulate initially, so it will be a while probably before we see whether we're getting close to that standard or not. And we did meet it last year, so we anticipate meeting it this year. $15.4 million in child support will be collected, which would be an average of almost $1.3 million a month. We are very close to that $1.3 million. For child support, tax season is when we get a lot of our money. And so we will see the months of February, March, April significantly exceeding what we're doing on a month-to-month basis. So that's where we will catch up. Again, not sure how the state's going to handle these differences. Okay, if we start talking about crisis intervention, that information is not available to us. Last year we were implementing NC FAST, but then most of the state was. So we struggled last year. My hope is that this year we're going to be in much better shape, but we don't have the information to tell you on that. As it relates to within 2 business days, again, don't have that information. So can't tell you how we are right now. 50% of our work-eligible individuals will complete their required hours of federally countable work. Nobody in the state is meeting that, and again, we do not have that information available to us. So I can't tell you where we are right now. 90% of 2-parent families will complete their required hours. Last year we were lower than the rest of the state, but nobody in the state's meeting that, and again, it's not available to us. And there are so few 2-parent families. You might have 2-parent families. So if one of those doesn't meet, then you're dead. Mm-hmm. So that's an issue with that particular standard. 100% of our Work First applications are processed within 45 days, and we are there, so meeting that standard. 100% of our recertifications are processed, so we met that standard in July also. 98% of our food stamp applications are expedited or processed within 4 days, so we met that standard. We met that standard last year, and we're meeting that standard now. Regular food stamp applications, 95%. We had 98%. We had 97% for the whole year last year, so we continue to meet that standard. Recertifications are processed on time. Again, we met that standard, and we can continue to meet that standard. 90% of the program integrity claims will be established within 180 days of the date of discovery. And you see we were at 100% for July. Again, it can vary based on volume each month, but that is where we stand right now on that one. Adult Protective Service evaluations will be completed. Abuse or neglect, alleged abuse or neglect will be completed within 30 days. We are not meeting that standard. We did not meet that standard last year. And part of that is staffing. Part of that has to do with how folks look at how they handle cases, I think, to some degree. But staffing has been a significant issue for us in the APS. 85% of the APS allegations alleging exploitation will be completed within 45 days. You see we did not meet that standard all of last year. We were at 100% for July. Those are, again, small numbers, and so that can be skewed easily based on the number of cases that you have and what happens with them. Our 85% of our special assistance applications will be processed within 45 days. For the year last year, we met that standard. For the month of July, we did not. 85% of the special assistance for disabled will be processed within 60 days. We did much better than we did for the whole year last year, but again, did not meet the standard. Close, but did not meet the standard. We are well above the state average, however, at least for this year. 95% of our child care subsidy applications will be processed within 30 days, and you see we are meeting that standard and have continued to meet that standard last year. So that is our best guess without receiving an official report from the state as to how we are doing on the MOU performance standards. And there's still a lot of work being done on those. So, questions?
How much work is it for you guys to come up with new ways to track these calculations that they want? Like a child who's moved 4.1 times within a 1,000-day window.
Yeah. Some of these reports exist at the
Okay.
state level, and you just have to go find the report.
Okay.
You're not always sure that that's the same report the state staff are looking at, because they have some reports sometimes that we don't have access to. But a lot of these, the state is tracking those for us.
Okay.
Now, I will say there's some that we don't, and that's why you don't have a report for crisis, for example. That's got, at this point, there's no report we can access for that.
So it doesn't create a lot more paperwork necessarily for you guys to track it. The
No.
time is in putting it in something like this. It's
Putting in
easy
a
to
report
follow.
to see. And I mean, in some cases, staff members do have to do some calculation, but it's not as huge as it would seem to be. So
Other
questions?
Do you want to talk about the Medicaid application processing, or
We can
that's
do
in
that.
there as long with
Right.
the agency personnel?
Right, we can do that real quick. The agency vacancy report, again, we continue, services is the area we're struggling with, trying to get folks in. It's difficult, we've had folks turn down our jobs, we've had folks that we can't get enough applicants, so that has been a problem for us somewhat. We are, got a couple of positions that are currently frozen, but we are in the process of screening, interviewing, doing background checks, so we are moving along on those positions. Our Medicaid application processing for the month, and we met it last month, but we didn't talk about it last month. But this month, we met it again, even with everything that was going on in the month of September, we still met our standards of processing things above 90%. So we did that.
Anything else from you?
That's all I have.
Board member comments? Dr. Bunch? Mr. Cox? Ms. Nelson? Then, I would remind you that the next meeting is November 13th. And to look at your upcoming events at the bottom of your agenda, and a motion to adjourn would be in order.
I'll make that motion, and I'll second.
All those in favor, let it be known by packing up your stuff.
Aye.